This is the Brain, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network. Yes!
There is nothing wrong with your podcast player. Do not attempt to adjust the volume. Hello and welcome to Studio 2009. I'm, of course, TFG Mike, and for our latest podcast approach, we welcome back OptimusSolo. You heard him in the most rewatched cartoons episode, which is kind of like backwards how we usually do. I usually have the podcast approach first, then do whatever other things. But he is here, and we're going to take him through the 30 questions all about listening to and producing podcasts in 2011, apparently.
I feel like I've gone 13 years in the past.
Pretty much, yeah. Because you don't know this yet, but this is also going to be a telecast reunion.
Oh, my.
I figured why the hell not put it on both feeds.
I hear you.
We don't want to get people's hopes up, though, but, you know, future, you never know what's going to happen. So, how the hell have you been?
I've been through some shit.
Yeah, you've dealt with the depressing home ownership stuff and all of that. You, like me, moved across the country, and you and your whole family did. And all that, and you are finally living in the correct time zone. He is in the Eastern time zone, everybody. It's amazing.
I don't call it the correct time zone, but it's a new time zone. So I moved 20 hours away from where I used to live. From July 1st, well, technically June 29th, whatever it was, from basically July through the middle of October, we had slept in 10 different beds. Then we finally got about a week or two before our house closed. And then we got hit by a little hurricane.
That wasn't so little.
It was only the biggest hurricane the state's ever seen, almost, or something in that realm. And the town that we moved to was directly in the heart of, not the eye of the hurricane, but in the heart of the damaging part of the hurricane. So most of the times when you're in a hurricane, I've come to find out, you get hit by one of the walls.
Yep.
And then you get stuck in the eye for a while, which is fine because nothing happens. And then you get hit by the other wall. And so you kind of get punched, and then you get to relax for a minute, and then you get punched on the way out. Well, the town that we moved to was in the wall of the hurricane for the entire time. It never got to the eye. So we hit one part of the wall and then just traveled down the wall to the other part of the wall without ever hitting the eye. So it was like the wall of the hurricane for whatever it was, I don't know how many hours, 8 hours, 6 hours, whatever.
Jeez.
But the house that we moved into basically had no damage. So that was lucky.
That's good, yeah.
So we moved into the house, and then less than a week or two later, all got COVID. So it's just been a fun ride, I guess. It's been a crazy year. And then on top of all that, we had every piece of my computer was found in the moving except for the power cord. Don't ask me. And so I had to buy a new power cord to get hooked up for that. And then I was missing the cord for the microphone. So the two cords I was missing was preventing me from doing much. But I am back up and running and maybe getting into some new sense of normalcy here soon.
Well, there's nothing normal about the state you moved to. So,
there's nothing normal about the state I moved away from either. So
that's true. You went from one cyclone to one hurricane. So, from tornadoes to hurricanes and back again. Good Lord. All right, we are here for the podcast approach, as I said. Getting started as podcasters. When did you first discover podcasts, and what was the first one you listened to?
You probably know better than I do. It had to be 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there. Let's see. 2007 was my first year doing that. So it had to be Did we start talking in 2008 or 2009?
Late '08, early '09.
Yeah, late 2008, early 2009. You introduced me to podcasting by inviting me onto a little thing called Tooncast.
Yes.
I think that came first before I don't think I had been on any
No,
Transformers stuff, did I?
Well, yeah, you were in a part of the big episode 16 of TFT1 because
Okay.
you and I did the Transformers the movie thing, and I don't remember without looking at it to see
I'd have
when
to look I'd have to look, but it was like the Transformers guest spot on the anniversary thing, and then Tooncast, that project started, and then for the longest time, I really only recorded, hosted, co-hosted, guested on podcasts. I didn't really listen in the beginning, so I guess in the early stages, I figured it was something that you just made, not something that you listened to.
Well, that's the greatest thing about when I started doing this little mini series with Inside Studio 2009. It's like, oh, I'm going to get everybody's podcasting journey that wants to come on, whether they listen to them or produce them or whatever. Yours is backwards from all of us because you never listened before you started.
Yeah, I just came in cold turkey, just said, let's record stuff, and the rest, we spent so much time planning and so much time recording and so much time behind the mic that I guess I just never thought about using any time to listen to it because my time was taken up at that point. I don't think it was years later before I started listening, probably. When we started getting it, when Dan and I started doing more of the movie stuff, I started listening to a half a dozen movie podcasts, True Romance, Simplistic Reviews, In Session Film, Film Spotting, things of that nature, and really got into that, was listening to those like nonstop because I basically had some time at the beginning of my day before work, before anybody else got to my work, where I was alone. So I could listen to, an hour to 2 hours, maybe in the mornings. And I would listen, like if I was mowing my yard or doing yard work or things of that nature. So I really started listening to those. And then that transitioned into eventually starting to listen to wrestling podcasts for some reason. And I bounced around a lot at the beginning because I was trying to find one that I liked, and I liked bits and pieces of them, but none of them were really hitting home for me. I listened to the old version of Jim Ross's podcast, I think the original one maybe. I listened to a little bit of Sean Waltman's. I listened to a little bit of Stone Cold's, and they were okay. I'm not saying they're bad, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And then I found, 83 Weeks and Something to Wrestle With and Grilling JR and My World with Jeff Jarrett and all of these that have been done by Conrad Thompson and his group. And that was more of what I was looking for, where they were just actually picking out an event or a person or, a certain thing and just kind of reminiscing and going through all the ins and outs of that. I can't do much of the watch along stuff because I'm usually not in front of a TV or computer when I'm listening to podcasts.
Yeah, the watch along stuff. Now, see, the kids today call it watch along, and even the old people today that do podcasts call it watch along. They're review podcasts. If you're sitting there and discussing it, it is a review podcast. And yes, your listeners will watch along with you unless you know the show frontwards and backwards. If you're, like us, diehard Transformers Generation 1 fans, you can go and listen to the TFG1 podcast right now without having to watch any single one of those 98 episodes beforehand.
Yeah, so that's like the main reason. That's the main reason I don't watch What Happened When with Tony, don't listen to What Happened When with Tony Schiavone as much. Even though I probably would enjoy it, it requires me to be in front of a computer and actually be watching the stuff to understand what they're doing. And like I said, I'm in the car or I'm at work or I'm in the yard. So it's very rare that I'm in front of a screen while I'm listening. Because if I'm in front of a screen, I'm probably creating myself. So
Yeah, and it's so strange that this whole, audio, video, let's do it all together. Let's separate it out. Let's do this. Look, and I'm not throwing shade on anyone who does video podcasting. That's fine. If you want to do that, if you want to, have it be that way for you, I can't, and I won't. I have to do audio because, like you're saying, if you're moving around, if you're going here, if you're going there, I could we'd be here all night counting the car crashes people would have if some video podcast was up on their Tesla heads-up display and they crashed their car because they were trying to watch somebody throw an elbow or something. I don't know.
I hope there's no elbows being thrown.
Well, you're talking about wrestling. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, I'm saying
you and I were throwing elbows.
No. We did that years ago. We're too old now. Here, take it. Just take it. It's over here. But like if you're sitting in your car, you can listen to something and it's fine. You can still concentrate on the road and whatever else. But if you have one of these futuristic cars that has a heads-up display in the front of your windshield,
right,
and that's what you're paying attention to versus paying attention to the road, which is what you should be doing, like, there's going to be some stuff. So, okay. Let's see. We did Tooncast, and we kind of planned that together, and I mean, we did plan it together, but I'm trying to set up this question because it's difficult with how your journey is. So question 3 is, what was your plan in getting your podcast off the ground? First of all, Steve and I already had the network established, and Steve did most of the background stuff with the website and everything else, still does, and he's awesome and all that good stuff.
Right.
But like for us, it was like, oh, let's just sit here for 7 hours and decide on everything we want to talk about.
Well, I think you originally had the plan for Tooncast before me, in a way, because you had invited myself and another gentleman on to be a threesome, a trilogy of hosts, I guess you could call it. And obviously that didn't pan out, and we kind of like on the fly we seemingly reformatted the show in a way.
We didn't really reformat the show. We just didn't invite that person back.
But I mean, then once it was like the two of us, then I felt a lot more, instead of me just being like the
third
invited other host of, a third, where you don't feel as strong probably sharing opinions. Then it was just the two of us, and it was much more like, I am now, you have unleashed my creativity now, and I'm going to offer a lot of suggestions and ideas, and now it's just the two of us, so I feel comfortable doing that.
I mean, there was, with Tooncast specifically, we had M-Wire was the movie we can review at the time when Steve and I started it. When Steve and I decide on if we're going to do something, we don't know which one of us is going to take it and run with it. And usually it ends up being me that takes it and runs with it. And when we were doing M-Wire, it was like, I can just look at my DVD shelf and I can I can list 100 films, and boom, there's 2 years of our lives. With Tooncast, it was more of, what do you want to cover? How do you want to do it? What do we want to do with this and this, that? So you had a hand in the plan. Like and Steve both had a hand in the planning of how that can't, because half the time it's, okay, what cartoon do we want to do this week? How much time do we have to watch at least 20 episodes of a 65 episode show where we can just talk about it really quick in an overview and just have fun discussing it? And that's what it was.
And I think the difference is when you put the words cartoon and OptimusSolo together, that the ideas are going to start overflowing. The possibilities are going to be so many that you could not possibly finish it all, because I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but I have a breadth of knowledge when it comes to cartoons and what I've seen and what I've been exposed to and what I've researched, what I've studied, what I've watched. And so I made you watch all kinds of obscure stuff that you may not have watched otherwise. And I do not feel bad about that.
There was some stuff that I had seen that I'm like, why are you making me watch this crap again? Nobody gives a crap about Mysterious Cities of Gold except for you. No, they don't.
Yes, they do. The theme song's great. They cared about it so much that they rebooted it. Anything that gets rebooted had some fan base. So, Adventures of Little Koala, I made you watch that. And
no, but you didn't make me watch that. I remember, I have a various, like with my cartoon stuff, it's more of like, I remember seeing an episode of that in between like 20 of Gem or 20 of He-Man or 20 of Transformers. I remember Adventures of Little Koala. What you did was you created the outtake because you pointed out, the all wet thing, which I then turned into this, which it didn't really go viral, but I tried to turn this into this viral outtake because that cartoon is very adult.
Now, people, listen to the 33-second clip.
Yes.
Listen very carefully.
Do it.
It happens every time when a boy tries to show off for his girlfriend. Sooner or later, he ends up all wet.
If you take it out of context, yes. But so then there was countless nights where we were planning upon planning, hours and hours and hours and millions of episodes, and we haven't hit the million mark yet, but maybe someday.
We're close. I know I'm at least over 3,000, I think. But
no, I just mean Tooncast episodes in general.
Oh, well, no, that show I'll be dead before that hits 1 million.
Okay.
Yeah,
so that's the goal.
No, not at all. Right now, we're about to approach 300, I think, total between Tooncast and Tooncast Beyond. So
nice.
So yeah, that's what's going on there. So you prefer audio podcasts and all that good stuff and everything else. What kind of setup did you have when you first started podcasting, and what do you currently use now? So what microphone, headphones, that kind of stuff?
It's almost the same setup, actually. I maybe originally, like right when we first started, for that first like little bit, I probably was using a random assortment of whatever I had. I think I bought, I remember now, I bought a headset that had a microphone attached to it. Mm-hmm. That was the first thing. And I ended up, it wasn't one of those cordless doohickeys like we have nowadays and things of that nature. It was plugged into something, and I am not good if I'm plugged into stuff, because I ripped that out of I broke it somehow. I think I tried to move and I was still connected or something. I don't know. I remember there's being some type of damage that I did on my headset, and then I immediately bought a Blue Yeti microphone, and I've been going strong with that since. It's still holding up pretty well. I probably could get a little bit more advanced with what I have on my ears, because I'm currently using my wife's pink headphones. And I probably could get like some in-ear things or something that's a more modern look or feel, but it
Do
works.
you mind having things in your ears?
No, the only thing that I worry about when I have these things on my ears is that most headsets that sit on your ears, to me, make noise.
Uh-huh.
As you talk, as you move your muscles, like they just creak and they do stuff, which probably I can only hear. But I always worry that some of that comes across the microphone, or, it's just not as seamless. So I would prefer probably having something straight in my ear that I don't have to worry about the movement. Okay.
Because I'm one of those types of people that I can't have things in, like I've had, and I tell this story every episode. I have the JVC HX something or other. They're wired, but the cord is long enough to where I don't even need most of it compared to where I sit and where the microphone is and all that. And they're just awesome. They just basically, they're noise canceling completely. Right. They, I don't, unless it's a car honking or unless it's a train crashing into something, or, right. Yes, I hear, like, I don't think you heard, but I was, as you're talking about, the headphones make noise. Like, I was sitting here trying to adjust them on my ears, but I heard the noise, but I don't think it came through on the microphone. No. So it's,
and I know mine doesn't either. It's just like more of a self-conscious thing where I'm like, I can hear stuff, so I don't want to do that. And then I have a nice noise canceling wireless Beats headphones that my wife had got me for birthday or Christmas at some point. But I can't figure out how to do that. And the Blue Yeti, like the wireless part of the headphones, I'm not smart enough, so I'm sure it can be done. I'm just not very smart because I do have those on when I'm listening to stuff that's playing on my computer. Like, let's say if my wife or the 2-year-old is sleeping or something like that, I will put those on and listen to stuff that's playing on my computer. But when it comes to recording, it causes some type of weird conflict. So
it shouldn't, and I'm sure at some point off air I can take you through it. It should not cause any kind of conflict.
Because that would be more ideal. Because right now what I have happening is my headset is also connected to my the Blue Yeti microphone. So it's all going into one feed. So that's the trick. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you have wireless, your computer should just automatically, like once you connect it, it should automatically figure out, oh, these are wireless headphones, and I don't know because I don't use wireless because I like them for, like you said, listening. For anything else, like for moving around. I sit here on my butt for 2.5 hours recording with people. I do not need a wireless headset. I would rather have the consistency and logistics of having it plugged in and all that. So, but we can figure all that out later.
Yeah, I think most of that comes down to the fact that when we're starting to record, I usually have like a minute to prepare because I've procrastinated or I'm coming in late or I'm coming, busy, whatever. So it's like I don't have time to mess with it. Usually I'm just like, oh, I know this works, so I'll just do this.
Yep. So not to jinx anything or anything like that, but if your equipment eventually breaks down or fails or whatever, are you going to go out and get the same stuff or are you going to upgrade?
I mean, I think the Yeti is pretty good.
It is.
I mean, I obviously there's probably upgrades and different setups that you can do and that people that are more professional use. It would probably just be a cost thing. I would, whatever makes the most sense from a cost standpoint that's not going to break the bank, I would probably just go with, whether that be another Yeti or whether that be something that's upgraded that's not a fortune.
Yeah, wired or wireless headphones, depending on how good they are. Like, I know the Sony XM4s are like $350.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
And those aren't even the most recent. Those are like one generation previous. The headset that I mentioned earlier that I actually have two of them. I could probably just send you the other one, but
my headset's fine. Like my headset's good.
Right? Yeah.
My Beats ones are fairly expensive and good. For a microphone though, if it broke down and I had to get one, like I'm not spending more than like $100.
Oh no! I over the last 14 years since we've been doing this, I've spent exactly $150, and each time I've bought the same microphone 3 different times.
Right.
The CAD U37 condenser mic, depending on where I found it, it was anywhere from $50 to $70 each time. So I've had 3 versions of it in 14 years. And the funny thing is, the other 2 versions, they had upgraded or they changed it. I'm still on the same damn one I was on 14 years ago. This thing still... just like me, it's a machine.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
I thought you were going to say, just like you, it's old and not willing to change, but you went a different direction, so I appreciate that.
Alrighty then. I think this whole series proves that I've changed in podcasting in the last 14 years. Anyway.
Hopefully the listeners got the gist from our first couple of questions that we've been doing this together a long time. So there's built-in sarcasm and busting of balls and things of that nature. That I'm not just some like random person he invited on and I'm being a dick. Like,
well, no,
we go back. And so I have built-in ability to be a dick and not be judged by it.
Oh, I judge you anyway, so it doesn't matter. Whether you're being a dick or not, I'm going to judge you. So, speaking of all the... Go to what? Next question. Next. Speaking of all this time, did you think you'd be podcasting for as long as you have?
Honestly, I didn't think one way or the other about it, so I didn't think I would be or I wouldn't be, but does it surprise me? I would say no, because a lot of my hobbies are long-standing, decades and decades long hobbies that I don't necessarily give up. Now, if you had told me that I would have been podcasting for 13 years now, I would have hoped that I would have made more episodes than I had. But I mean, granted, I've been on over 500 or whatever.
Yep.
Probably, whatever, however many it's been added on since we did that episode podcast. But there's been a lot of life stuff that gets in the way that prevents some time being used, and this, that, and the other. I would have loved to have been on season 8 of Telecast right now or something like that, and that didn't happen. And I would have loved to have already done review shows of all of G.I. Joe and all of whatever, Thundercats, Silverhawks, Turtles, et cetera, but we just haven't got there yet.
Yeah, it's still in the works.
Yeah.
So, hasn't gone away. It just hasn't happened yet.
Hey, we made it through He-Man.
Yeah. Are we sure?
You made it through Mask.
No, I
said you made it.
Yeah, technically I made it through Mask. You tapped out.
Yeah, I listened to that recently. I listened to a couple episodes of Mask. Yeah. Fun trip down memory lane.
Oh, Lord, yeah. No.
Some people really like that show, by the way.
I mean, it's fun times. We had fun doing it. Just that show, man. I used to sort of defend that show a little bit more than I do now. And now I'm just like, the theme song is kind of where it stops.
Theme song's
starts
good.
And stops.
No, the theme song's good and toys are good.
Yeah, okay, yes, the toys, but I'm saying
the idea behind it was good. The characters are good, but some people out there like that show though quite a bit. So more power to them.
Yep, absolutely. So, how have your podcasting goals changed in the last 13 years compared to now? Starting compared to now.
I think this is probably going to be similar to what you and Steve would answer this question with. I'm just going out on a limb and guessing that. But in the beginning, there was so much stuff that we hadn't done, so that there was 1,000 ideas, and we were just doing stuff left and right, and just trying to just record all the time because we had too many ideas, and so why not record and just get as many of them out there as possible? I think how it's shifted probably just because of life and the fact that, multiple of us have gone through, marriages or births of children or job changes or relocations and things of that nature, that it's now become a point to me. And I know Steve would agree to this. I'm not sure if you're in the camp as well, but I believe you might be, is that I'm only going to record if I feel some amount of passion towards whatever the topic is or the subject is, or, that type of thing. I'm not going to record just to record anymore, like we might have done the first couple of years, at least me, where it's like, well, we're doing this just to say we did it in a way. Like, for example, Tooncast, all right, we're covering, hundreds of cartoons over the course of that Tooncast show and Tooncast Beyond, et cetera. And there was no way that you and I were both passionate about all, let's say 200 cartoons. There was going to be some that came up that we were doing just to revisit, just to remember, reminisce, see if we liked it as an adult, et cetera. So that had a purpose. But I guess how I'm relating that to it now is if it came up with one of those shows that I wasn't passionate about now, and you were like, let's do a review show of that, I'm out. You know what I mean? I'm only doing stuff that I feel like I can bring some energy and passion, because the one thing that we have discovered as we record this stuff is that it's very obvious to the listeners if we're into it or not. And it's much more enjoyable for them to listen to it if we're into it. And it's much more enjoyable for us to record it if we're into it. So, if it's something up my alley, like a Transformers or He-Man or Turtles or this, that, and the other, I'm all about it. If you ask me to do a review of the CGI Masters of the Universe, though, I'm out. Can't do it. No interest, no passion about that.
He's lying, folks. He's lying. You know how I know he's lying? Because I asked him and I asked Steve, you guys want to do the CGI one? And Steve's like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. And between the three of us, hold on, let me
completist.
Hold on, let me no. It isn't even about that. So when I asked him,
we made a deal.
No, what? Well, yes, but just let me finish this part. Mm-hmm. So when I asked them about this, and Steve was like, yeah, sure, there were things I didn't like or things I did like, whatever else. I'm kind of positive about that show. I see the negatives in it, but it's not as negative as basically you saying, oh, I guess I'll show up just to be the negative opinion of the three of us. That's essentially what you said. And yes, I know I'm going to take that stance when it comes to talking about Netflix's shitra. So
the agreement was, since we've done all the He-Man series, including the New Adventures, which I would never do again, is the fact that if I'm going to do the CGI He-Man, then you're going to do the Netflix She-Ra.
Well,
and
yeah.
Then we'll be able to say everything was covered. But my point was more so like if you said we're doing an extensive look into, like, I don't know, Johnny Bravo or something, like, I'm not doing it at this stage in my podcasting recording because it just wasn't something I was into.
Yeah, and again, what I have done is, and how I've curated the stuff for me is more so anything I'm interested in, I'll do it.
Right. And I'm not saying like I wouldn't do it as an episode of Tooncast. Like a Tooncast, it was just a synopsis. It was a look. Yeah. And you didn't have to spend a lot of time with it. Sometimes we watched a lot. Like I remember when the first Thundercats episode came out, or Silverhawks, one of them, I think I almost watched the whole thing.
Yeah, we did.
A lot of the stuff we would watch, 5 episodes of.
5 or 6 just to refresh ourselves. So
just to get a feel for it and stuff like that. That's not that much of an investment. I would do that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, okay, let's like a big project. Like a big project would be like a top 100. So if you said that, if you said we were going to be doing like the top 100 flavors of coffee, I'm not going to do that because I have nothing to bring to the table. So whereas in the beginning, you might have convinced me to do something stupid like that. Not that specific one, but something like that. I don't even drink coffee.
I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh at that because all I can think of is those stupid Jamaican coffee kids in 10 Things. That was Costa Rican, butthead. Oh, God.
And some people could do that. Some people are coffee connoisseurs, or some people could do like their 100 favorite alcohols or something, or beers or whatever. But I don't drink coffee, so I don't have anything to bring to the table.
Well, and that's what I was going to say earlier was that for me at this month. Oh, crap, that anniversary is like in a couple of days away from us recording this. I'm about to celebrate 14 years of doing this podcast thing. And in 14 years, what I have done is I have cultivated the point of, like I said a second ago, I will review anything that I enjoy because that's what I want to do. I want to talk about the things that I enjoy. And I cater those things to I've cultivated so many people and so many different things over the last 14 years. Like, I would never in my right mind ask you to do something that I know like you have no interest in. I might check with you and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing something like this. If it's not something you're interested in, please let me know now so I can move forward and, whatever.
So the short answer to that long answer that I gave was, over the years, I guess I've just become more selective. Like in the beginning, if anybody asked me to guest on their show or co-host or do a spot on this episode, I probably would have said yes, as long as my schedule allowed it. And now I'm much more selective, and I try to keep the passion in whatever I'm doing.
Right. Absolutely. All right. This is going to be weird. I mean, I guess technically you've been doing it for a while now, but as a podcast listener, what defines a good podcast to you?
It starts and ends with energy. If someone has energy, it comes across. Like, it's just, I think that's something I didn't learn necessarily through listening to podcasts. That's something I learned when I was a teacher. Because if you are quote unquote lecturing or giving a lesson or doing anything in front of students and you don't have energy and you're boring and you're not, all in and passionate about it, it's just a terrible lesson. Whereas if you're someone that's, making it interesting, making it fun, making it humorous, etc., it just goes over so much better. So I think that's one thing. I mean, there's just little things like as far as technical stuff that you learn as you listen to other podcasts. Like some are just much better when it comes to the editing process than others. Some just leave stuff in that you're like, well, nobody's paying attention there. So just trying to, those glaring things catch. Sound quality, I think, was something that came across a lot more as I listened to more podcasts, because you can listen to a dozen podcasts and you're going to hear a dozen different levels of quality when it comes to sound and recording. And I'm not saying that I'm at the top of any of that, but, you can tell when someone's recording on a cell phone, someone's recording while they're driving, someone's recording on cheaper equipment versus okay equipment versus expensive equipment. Obviously, there's professionals out there that are making a lot of money doing this, and they have a really great equipment, and so you can tell.
Yeah.
So, but there's just different stages of that quality of sound that I've noticed more when I started listening to it, because if you're always recording, it's hard because you might listen to yourself back or some of your episodes back to hear it. But if you don't have something to compare it to, you're not really seeing, oh, wait, they sound way better than we do. Or what are they doing that's making that work, and things of that nature. And I think the other thing is just ads. Man, some shows get really hard to listen to because of the number of ads. Now, granted, I listen to a lot of the Conrad Thompson. I don't know what the name of his group of podcasts are. Yeah. But I listen to a lot of them, and they are unless you do the ads-free version, they're chock full of ads.
Yeah.
He does do a good job of making them very humorous, though, at times. Yeah. So I don't mind them as much, but I've listened to other stuff where it's just like ad after ad after ad. Like they talk for like 15 seconds, and then it's another ad, and it's just like, man, I'm out. Like I can't do it. So just having something to compare it to, I think, is what I learned as I started listening to podcasts.
Yeah, and we understand that because our stuff has ads. It's had ads for at least the last 6-7 years now.
For sure.
And we get it, but I have worked my ass off to make sure that the ads that our provider wants us to have in there are not breaking up conversation.
Yeah, because that sucks.
That is the worst thing in the world. Like, I just listened to a podcast today where they did a nice little preamble intro, and then they did their, welcome to the show. I'm this host, and this host. And as soon as that third host said their name, I heard the little sound effect, and boom, we were in an ad. And it was not even 5 minutes into the show. So I've curated to the point where you're going to hear 2 ad breaks in this episode, folks, and that's where all of the ads will be, so it does not take away from the amazing stories that OptimusSolo has.
Let's not get carried away here.
Amazing is in air quotes, even though people can't see me making air quotes with one hand.
Because we're not doing the video.
Yes, video. But I break cameras. I don't. Yeah. Anyway,
he's not lying.
Shut up. Asshole. As a listener, what does a podcast have to draw you in? So you listen to an episode, whether it's a new one or whether you start at the beginning, what in, say, the first 5 minutes does that show have to have for you to come back and listen to the next one?
I think it just goes back to my other answer. It has to have energy off the bat. Like it has to have some type of upbeatness, something where you can see the passion in their voices, or you can hear the humor, or something of that nature. Because if it's just like, if it's kind of like what I'm doing right now, where it's just somebody monotone, just like,
well, you're
hello.
Not monotone.
No, but if I was just like, today we're going to talk about this subject over here, and this is what we're going to do for the next hour and 15 minutes, and I hope you like it because we're going to talk about that. And if it's something like that, I'm not going to make it past about 30 seconds. And I've tried, because there's been stuff that has been of similar topics that we've covered, or stuff that we've been researching, or different things that just were related to, like, let's say we're doing our journey through all the He-Man shows.
Yes.
I listen to a few other He-Man podcasts, and some of them are well-established, long-running ones. Some of them are just kind of one-offs, things of that nature. And, they're all different levels of quality. When I used to try to, listen to a few different things when we were trying to add more shows to our network. Mm-hmm. We would try to branch out and say, hey, we don't have anything that covers this. Let's go find a few podcasts and listen to them and whatever. And sometimes that's very painful. And you'll see those people that just don't have any, and it's nothing wrong. Like, you guys can record whatever you want to record. And some people aren't doing it for listeners. Like a lot of times we're not doing it for listeners. We're doing it, yes, because some people like it, and hopefully people will like it, but we're not professionals. We're not making a salary doing this or things of that nature. So whatever we want to record is fine. It's not hurting anybody. So whatever, if it brings us joy, we should do it regardless. And these people should do it as well. But you could just tell, when you were listening to some of those, that you're like, I don't need to finish this episode to know that it's not something we want to add to the network.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I always say this as part of my story, is that in the beginning, I sounded like the very first radio announcer you see in Good Morning Vietnam, the old guy. today the weather will be, the wind will be 45 miles out of the east or the west or right before Robin Williams comes into Good Morning Vietnam. That was me in the beginning. And after 14 years, I think I've perfected being better than that.
Right.
Not the best, I'm not the worst, but what?
Reading is also something. If you're just reading stuff, it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to read the Wikipedia synopsis, then are you really doing a podcast, or are you just reading look, we get it. Synopsis. If you're doing a review show, you have to read some sort of synopsis from somewhere, or you have to write one yourself after watching the thing or doing whatever, and it's fine. I still read every now and then, and half the time I'll call myself out on it. I'm going to be reading this now, just so you know, that kind of thing, and it's fine. But it is what it is. But yeah, don't just sit there in front of the microphone and read aloud. This isn't a book report; it's a goddamn podcast. Damn it!
Right. Absolutely.
As a listener, do you prefer, oh God, this question. As a listener, do you prefer short 30 minutes to an hour and 30-minute shows, or do you prefer longer podcast episodes as in 2 hours or more?
I know a lot of people are very hung up on this. They will only listen to stuff if it's X amount of time or blah, 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 blah. I honestly don't care. If it's interesting, I'll listen to a 3-hour podcast. If it's interesting, I'll listen to a 20-minute podcast. It does not affect me how long it is. I have various amounts of time. So usually I'm listening to, for example, if I'm putting on, just throwing something out there, let's say I'm going to listen to something to wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, and it's about, I don't know, Macho Man, Randy Savage. And it's a 2-hour and 10-minute show. I'm probably listening to that in 3 or 4 chunks.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm listening to it on my way to work. I get about, 30 to 40 minutes in. I listen to it on my way back, get another 20, 30 minutes in, an hour while I'm mowing the yard. And then that episode gets done and I just click on the next one and I listen to that however many days it's going to take me to finish that one. And then I go on. So it really doesn't matter to me as long as it's interesting. I don't care if it's a lot of time spent on a subject. If it's something that's entertaining me, it's something that's interesting. It's something that's humorous. One of those things has to be happening. It's got to be interesting, humorous, something of that nature for me to keep listening. But I've listened to some I don't tend to listen to short ones that much just because the ones that I tend to listen to happen to be mostly an hour and a half to 2 hours. Yeah. But that doesn't mean when I see something that's less than that, I'm like, oh no, I'll whatever. If it's a 45-minute show, I'll check it out and see what's up.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I would say as long as it's 45 minutes at minimum, I have in the past listened to 3, 4, 5-hour shows. We've recorded 3, 4, 5. Look at all 90,000 episodes of the Top 100 Countdowns, folks. That's. I think I added that up recently. Amongst the 7 that are, or the 6 or 7 that are currently done, I think it's just over. Yeah, it's just under 100 hours of content for 7 different Top 100 Countdowns since 2011.
Yeah. To me, it's different than a TV show, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you're listening to a TV show, I don't prefer to stop that in the middle. Movies sometimes you can, but a TV show, you'd really need to watch the whole thing. So if it's an hour TV show, if it's a half-hour TV show, you got to finish it. With a podcast, for me, I don't care where I have to stop. If I have to stop 20 minutes in, and then the next time I listen to 45 minutes, and then one time I'm able to listen to an hour at a time, it makes no difference. I stop it and I pick it up right where it left off because they're just talking about stuff. It's not like I have to remember what character A was doing with character B and what the motive between this killer was or this lover was or whatever. I'm just listening to people talk about a subject that I like, so I can pick it up wherever and it doesn't affect me. So it could be a 3-hour podcast and maybe I listen to it in 3 1-hour chunks. That's fine. Who cares?
Yeah, and that's the thing with podcasts is that play, pause, or play, stop, right. Play, stop. It's a stop. But podcast listening is essentially stop and go traffic. There have been times where I've been listening to one podcast and I'll see a new episode from another podcast. I'll stop the one I'm listening to and go listen to the other one because I'm more interested in it. And I'll go back to the one I was already listening to, that kind of thing. And the time thing, it is what it is. But again, like we've already said,
I get it if it's long for no reason. If it's long and it's stopped being interesting, or there's too many dead spots or lulls or uninteresting sections and they're just kind of rambling, that's different.
Yeah. And I mean, there are perfectly good podcasts out there that do like to ramble, and there are plenty of podcasts I know and I enjoy that do tangents and everything else. And they may not
usually
always,
okay if it's comedic. Usually okay if there's some level of comedy or humor.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And even I do it plenty of times.
Well, I mean, you're not funny, but other than that.
Ha! Asshole.
Twice.
So getting back to the time thing, in the beginning, I didn't want to do I still don't want to do short stuff, but like you said, it basically depends on what the content is. It depends on what the hosts have to say. And if after 45 minutes it's a good show and we find a wrap up place, fine. Doesn't have to be an hour. Doesn't have to be an hour and a half. Doesn't that why draw
it's just like
out?
You brought up the top 100, and it's very similar because I typically am steering the boat on the top 100s and trying to navigate the waters through the listings and reveal the stuff and this that. And I'm throwing it to different people to get their opinion on whatever has been revealed at this number and that number. And if we're on a certain number, so let's just say, for example, we're doing the top 100 animated series and, Transformers comes up. Everyone's going to have a lot to say about Transformers. So if it's interesting and it's moving at a good pace and the conversation's kind of bouncing back and forth, I might let that go on for a good number of minutes. If the next show comes up and it's some show that not as many people on the panel are familiar with, we might spend only 30 seconds on it or a minute on it or something like that. So it's kind of like that same thing. So we might have top 100 episodes that ended up running really long compared to other ones. Most of them do run long, but we might have, the difference between a 2 hour and a half one and a 1 hour and 45 minute episode is how much that conversation was bouncing, how much there was energy, how much we were keeping, focus and whatnot, and not having to, ramble into nothingness. So it's kind of the difference between that, steering that boat and trying to decide, okay, it's time to move on. So I'm never thinking about, we need to clock in at 2 hours exactly. We can clock in 20 minutes longer, 20 minutes shorter. It just depends on how things were going.
Again, it also goes into planning as far as specifically for a news show or this show or that news reaction show, whatever it is, when we do All Things Transformers or when we do Altered Geek or whatever, even Geekcast Radio, depending on what the topic is, usually I or Steve or somebody will come up with bullet points. And I'm specifically talking about the discussion shows, not the review shows, the overall geek discussion type stuff, where it's we have enough that we want to talk about that's going to take us to about 45 minutes or so as far as the actual final recording once it's edited and whatever else. Okay, great, fine, that's awesome. This is a while ago now, but by the time this comes out, it will be a while ago. The last news reaction episode Steve and I did, I think it stopped at 48, 50 minutes because we were done talking about the stuff that we wanted to talk about. And that's fine. Like we said, the whole time thing it's a weird construct.
Some people are very much, they won't listen to you if you're more than 45 minutes or whatever. That's fine. Yeah. It's fine. To each of their own. Yep. They don't listen to a lot of Geekcast Radio stuff, I
promise. Well, 100 hours for 700 episodes, 700 numbers, that's a lot. As a listener, do you start at the beginning of a podcast, the most recent episode, or you jump around?
It depends on the topic. I haven't done this, but if I was going to go out and listen to Powers of Grayskull or Mass Mayhem or the TFG1 podcast, I'm starting at the beginning and I'm going episode by episode in chronological order all the way through, because that doesn't make sense to do it any other way for me. When it comes to a lot of these wrestling ones or even the movie ones, for the movie ones, for example, there are some, I would not listen to most of them unless I had already seen the movie. Mm-hmm. So, when we were able to watch as many movies as we were up, a number of years ago, when we were going to the movie theater twice a week or, 3 times a week or whatever it was, I was able to keep up with those. And most of the time it was something that was related to something I'd just seen. So I would listen to it, right away, etc. But let's say they had one and it was one that I had missed in the theater. I would skip that one until it was out on DVD. Then I was able to watch it. Then I would go back and listen to that episode and things of that nature. When it comes to the wrestling ones, it just completely depends on the interest level. Yeah. So, if they were doing an episode on Tatanka or Macho Man or someone like that, British Bulldog, I would probably listen to that as soon as it drops. If they're doing an episode on someone I didn't really care about, like the Brooklyn Brawler or something like that, it might have to sit in queue for a while before I got to it. And then it just depends on the actual podcast. Like 83 Weeks, there's not many of those that I don't listen to. Mm-hmm. So I'll get to clear that. Whatever ones are left in there that I haven't listened to, I'll clear out first before maybe one of the other wrestling ones that I'm not quite as into. Some of those are more fallbacks. Like if there's no 83 Weeks or no something to wrestle with, then I'll go to Grillin' JR or My World with Jeff Jarrett and see what's new on there. And I'll just kind of scroll through and pick whichever one seems interesting to me, because those aren't really, there's no sequential reason to listen to those in a certain order. It's just random topics. So it just depends on the topic of the actual podcast.
As a listener, how many hosts are too many on one episode?
Man, if I would have not been a listener, I would have been able to skip like half these questions. It depends. I would say probably when you're getting into the 5 range, that's probably too many, unless the topic just really caters to something and you really have to have somebody driving the ship in that situation.
Oh, yeah.
Because otherwise people are talking over each other or there's just not good direction. So if you do have a 4 or 5 or 6 person podcast, you really have to be careful with who's leading the direction there. So in general, 3 I think is a really good number for most shows. 2 can work with a lot of shows. 1 takes a very special person and or topic, or just everything has to line up perfectly. I'm trying to do a solo podcast behind the scenes and build up episodes and whatnot, and we'll see if it works or not. But you really have to be the Energizer Bunny when you're doing that and be on top of things. So really, I'd say 2, 3, 4, but 3 is about perfect.
Yeah, 3 is most definitely the evenest of the odd numbers out there. So that's what it needs to be. When do you stop listening to a podcast altogether?
Most of the time, it's, for me so far, it has been 3 things, probably, I guess. Yeah, let's say 3 things. Well, 4. We'll go with 4. So the first one is the most common one for me, which is I just have another podcast that is catching more of my attention at that moment. Mm-hmm. So I was listening to a whole lot of movie podcasts, which was good, and I enjoyed them a lot. But then for a little bit, I just got into the wrestling stuff and the nostalgia there, and I had an itch that I needed to scratch there. So the wrestling podcast kind of took precedence, and I stopped listening to most of the movie podcasts. That might cycle back again. As I get tired of the wrestling podcast, I might need to change. It's just kind of like when you're eating certain foods, you can OD on certain stuff, and then you go, like, especially when it comes to junk food or a certain type of chip or, stuff like that. Like, you go for a while where you're just like getting it every time you go to the store, and then you go 6 months without it type thing. Yep. So it could just be something else as the flavor of the month for now. That could be one reason why I just stop listening to it altogether. The second reason would be probably, and myself specifically, guilty of this in the podcast that I have been a part of, is the frequency or the regularity of the releases stops being consistent. So if all of a sudden, you're used to checking every Wednesday for it to drop, or, every other Wednesday for it to drop, and then all of a sudden it's 2 months and there's not an episode, and then you listen to one and there's 3 months and there's not an episode, you start to lose a little bit of you get out of the habit, I guess, of checking that specific feed. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Chicken Pot Pod could have made a resurgence and all of a sudden be putting episodes out in 2022, and I would not know about it because I stopped checking that like a decade ago. You know what I mean? But it would be something where if they were having, and I know Christopher Stapleton doesn't do podcasts, but he's in a different walk of life now. But I would listen to their show if there was a new episode tomorrow, but I'm not going to know that because I stopped checking, because eventually I got out of the habit because they just weren't happening. So just infrequency of episodes, which I'm guilty of most of the time. And then the other one, sometimes a host just rubs me the wrong way. So sometimes it's like a friendship or a relationship. Everything's good in the beginning. So when you're listening to that podcast and you're new to listening to that host and things like that, like everything's all good and you might be giving them the benefit of the doubt, but then you've listened to 150 episodes and now certain things that they do are grating on your nerves. So I'm not going to name a specific podcast, but for example, there was one that I used to listen to, and I have nothing against them or their podcast, but they would continuously use a couple words that were not being used properly. Like they didn't understand what the word meant. So, but they used it a lot as a descriptor, and it was just driving me nuts that they were using a word incorrectly. And, just something simple like that. It could be just a phrase that they use over and over again. It's like, those tics that you have when you're a speaker in front of people, like the ums or the, I just did it. So, did it. Sometimes it's a phrase. Like I used to have a boss that would say, what did he say? Oh God, it's going to drive me nuts because he used it all the freaking time. Like, this wasn't what he said, but it would be similar to like saying after every phrase saying the words like on that note. On that note, on that note, on that
and
note.
on that note, we're going to be moving on to the next thing, and then we're going to spend 20 minutes onto this, and then on that note, we're going to go to the next thing.
Right. Yep, so if there's just like one of those sometimes those don't even hit my radar, but sometimes it's a grading one. So if it's something like that, I'm just not probably, eventually it's going to hit a time where the relationship's like, now those things that my friend is doing is driving me nuts. Where you have that first fight with your best friend because you've spent like 700 nights together with sleepovers and parties and things like that. And you're finally like, you're on my last nerve. So it's kind of like one of those where I'll just stop cold turkey with a podcast for a while and I might go back to it later on. But so I guess those are the main three. I said 4, but those are the main 3.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends really. And all those things that we use to fill the space, I would rather, in the editing, just cut the dead air than have to cut.
Yeah, I know this is some of the tics don't bother me. Like if someone is doing it, but they're staying in pattern, so to speak, or staying in cadence, then it's not going to grate on my nerves like what I'm talking about, where I would just like stop listening to someone. Yeah. So I think we all have had certain stuff. Dan and I, especially, I think, would have phrases or words that we would say a lot in the beginning that those never bothered me. Like when I was listening to Talking in Circles or some of his stuff, there was not much that he would do that would bug me. And I might even have the wrong person. It might be somebody else I co-hosted with at one point that did have a couple of those phrases that they used, but they didn't do it in a way that wrecked the rhythm of the speech and the discussion and things like that, compared to when it's something where it's just like you're doing that and it's throwing me off. Like I can't follow the conversation now. But
and the funny thing is my biggest thing with the ums and the ahs and my 2 biggest things with that is it infects me because I will start doing it if people do it, and it gets to the point where my brain just fell out of my head and I don't know what the hell I was going to say.
Well,
God damn
that's
it.
happened before.
Well, we know that, but hello, I am brain damaged. But it's one of those things where that's what it is. It surprises me that I can have a conversation with anybody in real life, on the telephone, hell, without even hitting the record button. And ain't nobody saying but as soon as that record light goes on, as soon as somebody's microphone starts blinking at them, they're going to say this every other
But I think the reason that happens is because when they're being recorded, they're trying to think out their words very carefully because of the culture and the society that we live in a way, and not to get political or whatever, but it's you can say stuff that gets misinterpreted so easily or taken out of context so easily that I think as soon as that button goes on for a lot of us, we're trying to pick our words carefully. We're trying to think out our things before we say them, but we're more conscious of the fact that when you're doing that in real life, like if I'm having a conversation with you on the phone or in person and I pause, you're not going to think anything of it. It's, I'm pausing, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, and it's not awkward. But when we're recording that same pause, we get nervous about subconsciously that now there's a pause that the listeners are listening to that makes us feel like we need to fill it with something. It's subconsciously, not consciously, but subconsciously.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I understand it. It's just the other thing for me that really just burns me is if you're going to do, this movie was, fine, make the damn sound effect. Don't sit here and tell me it's a goddamn chef's kiss. I cannot. There's 2 words in podcasting I hate besides is chef's kiss. Don't ever say it. Oh my God, I will edit it out so damn fast. You can make the sound effect. You can use some other descriptor, but it just, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
I'll put that in my back pocket.
There you go. What podcasts are you currently listening to?
I basically have already mentioned it. It's something to wrestle with, and 83 Weeks are the main 2.
Okay.
Occasionally, I will listen back to some of our stuff, whether it's present or past, if I'm coming up with ideas or trying to brainstorm about something we may or may not do, just to refresh my memory and things of that nature. And eventually, I'll probably listen to more of the movie podcasts if and when I get to watch movies again. Can't do
that's going to be the interesting thing with your young 2-year-old daughter is that once she grows up, you can say,
well, I guess I could do a hell of a run on some animated movies right now. You want me to talk about Trolls World Tour? I got you. Luca, I'm all over it. Encanto, I can tell you beat by beat. So you want to talk about any of those? I got you.
Nobody gives a crap about Bruno.
I guess not. In multiple movies, they don't like Bruno.
All right, folks, we're going to go to a quick ad break. You're going to hear some ads and some other stuff, and we're going to come back to continue on with OptimusSolo and ask him all about his podcast production right after this.
Because the world needs another movie podcast.
The GeekCast Radio Network presents for your listening pleasure the Cinema Geek.
Hosted by Amanda, Kevin, Matt, and Dan.
Each week we dive headfirst in the landscape of movies as we discuss movie news, play movie games,
go in-depth on reviews,
and even have a top 10 countdown or 2.
Also, don't miss our director retrospective series, where we review noted directors' movies film by film. Bottom line is, if you love movies and love podcasts, you need to experience the Cinema Geeks.
You can find us on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, or GeekCastRadio.com.
Like science fiction? Of course you do, or you wouldn't be listening to the GeekCast Radio Network. Well, the Mark Who 42's Universe podcast is an award-winning sci-fi radio show that's been around for over 10 years. We cover everything from Doctor Who to the MCU to pop culture and everything in between. A new show drops on Tuesday mornings on the GCRN website and all of the major podcast platforms. So listen to the Mark Who 42's Universe podcast from the universe and beyond.
Hi, I'm Terry Smith, the host of Music Talks, the podcast where I ask guests a simple but beguiling question. Choose a song from each decade of your life and tell me why these songs mean so much to you. Guests and listeners love this format, and if you want to find out why, then take a listen at musictalkspod.buzzsprout.com or use your favourite podcast app. Just search on Music Talks Terry Smith. If you'd like to be a guest on the show and talk to me, then send me a tweet at Music Talks Pod. I look forward to doing some music talking soon.
Do you know John Hyatt songs?
Maybe you know them from being covered by Roseanne Cash, Three Dog Night, the Neville Brothers, Emmylou Harris, Eric Clapton, B.B. King, Jeff Healey, Bonnie Raitt, or literally hundreds of others.
Maybe you have some of his albums on your shelf, or in your cow-horned Cadillac right now.
I'm Jesse Jackson.
And I'm Sylvan Groff.
and we're going to dive in from A to Z. Join us on the Perfectly Good Podcast.
We're going to discuss all of your favorites and uncover some forgotten gems, from Aces Up Your Sleeve to Zero House.
Rate and debate every John Hyatt song on the Perfectly Good Podcast. Have a little faith.
Hi, my name is Dr. Andrea Letamendi, clinical psychologist.
And I'm Brian Ward, nerd. And we want to invite you to listen to our new podcast, The Arkham Sessions.
It's a podcast dedicated to the fun
and geeky
analysis of Batman the Animated Series, episode by episode.
We pay tribute to the writers and the stories of the animated series,
while also exploring the very real psychology behind Gotham's rogues.
And maybe even its heroes. All of this and more
each week
on The Arkham Sessions
at UnderTheMaskOnline.com.
Hello, geeks and geekettes! Looking for a podcast that covers a vast array of topics? Then check out Altered Geek Unleashed, where we discuss our thoughts on this week's geeky news, tech, gaming, television shows, movies, cartoons, comics, and more. So, get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks. Every Friday on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Discover a world of vintage and modern toys that's more than meets the eye with the Triple Takeover Toycast.
Hosted by toy writers and photographers Toybox Soapbox, 6O and TF Square 1, this informal and chilled out series of discussions cover everything from vintage Transformers to Mask, Diaclone, Microman and more, be it nostalgic or current.
Whether you're a seasoned collector or a casual robot enthusiast, all are welcome.
Triple Takeover Toycast.
We are back here inside Studio 2009, and we're going to talk about podcast production. I'm, of course, TF and Mike, back with OptimusSolo. As a producer, do you find yourself listening to podcasts less and less?
I would say no. I think I listen to them more, actually, just to see what other people are doing, what kind of techniques they're using, etc., etc., but it's more subconsciously or vicariously or whatever word you want to use. Like, it's not like I'm actively hunting down people and studying their techniques. It's just I pay attention while I'm listening to what people are doing and what I like that I hear and what I don't like that I hear.
Yeah. That question is more of once you, and you're not like me. Nobody's like me, thank God.
Thank God.
But we're basically, podcasting is my life, whether it's listening or producing or whatever. But when we first started X number of years ago now, I found myself listening less and less because I was doing more work on the shows and stuff. Like, in the beginning, I wasn't editing anything. Steve was doing that, so I could go listen to whatever, and then I took over the editing, which is fine. I've never had a problem with that. And now I find myself in more of a mix of, kind of like equal time. Like, I'll spend 2 or 3 days catching up on podcasts, and then I'll spend 2 or 3 days editing 7 days. Like, yeah. So we're in 2023 now. Over the end of the Christmas break, folks, I edited, I think, 8 podcasts to be released the end of 2022, beginning of this new year that we're in 2023. So usually I haven't had the stamina to do that since before the top 100 Transformers characters countdown, which nearly killed me.
That's my best shot.
So yeah. Yeah, it's probably the only shot you're going to get now. As a producer, are you a podcast planner or are you throwing stuff at the mic to see what sticks? Please
don't throw things generally. I am a planner to a fault, I would say. I like to plan and overplan and plan things that are never going to happen and write things down and make lists and make schedules and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
They will happen. We just have to find the time to do them.
Time. Father Time, you son of a...
Well... All right, let's see. As a producer, are you a one-man show kind of host, or do you prefer working with co-hosts?
I kind of enjoy both, honestly. I mean, it's easier with co-hosts. It's easier to bounce things off of and keep the energy going and keep the flow going. I like to somewhat I like on the top 100s kind of moderating that in a bit or directing the flow in a way. Not that I don't add my own 2 cents, but I kind of like being the guy that throws it to this person or throws it to that person or tries to decide when it's time to move on or when it's time to probe some more. Like I like doing all that, but I also have done some solo stuff where way back in the day with Telecast and kind of behind the scenes on some other things that I've been doing. And it's somewhat fun as well, only because I can do that when I have the time without coordinating anything. So if I have free time that's unexpected or spontaneous and I want to be creative or I want to do that, I don't have to reach out to anybody. I don't have to schedule it. I can just grab a camera or grab an audio, mic or whatever and just have at it. So that's kind of fun to just be your one-man gang at times, but it is tricky.
Yeah, I don't like it because it's more of, oh shit, what am I going to do now for me? Like, it's like I'll have a thought, but I want to have somebody there to discuss the thought with. It takes
a lot more planning, and it's a lot more of performance isn't the right word, but you really have to kind of hype yourself up. You have to have the energy. You have to have like for me, I've been in some theatrical, community theater type things, and you're the one that has to know your lines, right? You're the one that has to know your actions and what you're going to do and your movements and placing and all that kind of choreography type stuff. So when you're getting ready for something like that, you're somewhat hyping yourself up. You're repeating your lines in your head. When I say hype, like just really trying to make sure you have the energy and all that type of stuff, because you are, even though you're working with a group, you're really responsible for your own actions. And I feel like that's what you have to do when you're solo recording. You have to do a lot of planning. You have to have your bullet notes or memorize things or whatever it's going to be. And then, so you have a roadmap. And then during the course of that, you have to really make sure that you're the one that's bringing the entertainment value, the energy, the passion behind it. Whereas when I'm recording with, say, you and Steve or you and Dan or on a top 100, outside of the prep work that goes into the list creation, I don't have to do any of that because it's a little bit more of an improv thing when we're with a group. Like I don't have to hype myself up. I just have to know the general roadmap and I can just bounce off of each other, everybody on the record. So it's a completely different experience, but I kind of enjoy both.
Yeah. And it's the same thing for me. It's like, for me, I've always said since for the last 13 and a half years of the network of GCRN, Steve overall is the voice, is the guy that people may or may not usually hear first. But normally what I've fallen into, what I've tended to do since I have the most time to dedicate to it, is I have become the intro and outro host. So whereas like I'll start the show and then I'll hand it off to you or whatever else, and then you can go ahead, be the host, do the directing the traffic and whatever, especially in the top 100s. I mean, you do a great job of that. I can't. Oh God, math. Don't even get me started. So it's one of those types of things where it's a team effort, especially on a project like that. Like you can't
especially depending on which group of people we're having on it. Like it's different if it's you, me, Steve, and Dan or DJ or somebody that we're just used to recording with. When it's a new person that we're not used to, or 2 new people, and every record it's changing, that adds a whole new element, because you do have to make sure that you're not letting them ramble or picking out points where it's dragging and moving along and things of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you go about finding your co-hosts?
Hunted me down. No, I'm just kidding.
Technically, he berated us, and then we let him on the show.
Remember, that was
kind of
2.5 years ago or something. You're gonna have to refresh my memory once upon a time at some point. But anyways, when I was doing Telecast, it was pretty simple. I just reached out to anybody that was part of the network, and it was more about who had interest in a topic, who had knowledge of a topic, versus wanting that person or wanting this person. When we do the top 100, it's a little different. We do try to get somebody that has some knowledge about said subject matter, etc. But with top 100, it's a lot more about who's going to bring that. Like I keep going back to whether it be the humor, whether it be the energy, something of that nature. And that's why DJ ends up being on so many records, because he just brings a natural energy and humor and passion to whatever he's doing. But that plays a part. It depends on what kind of record we're doing. Like if we were doing like back in the day when we were really getting into like a subject matter and needing experts, that's a different thing. When it's something that's a little bit more fun and just laid back, then it's a different search. So I think it just depends on what the record is.
Yep, absolutely. As a producer, do you feel you need a mixing board and all the fancy stuff that essentially would be found at a radio station, or are you good with a
At the beginning, I thought that stuff was going to be necessary. I do enjoy having like a bank of sound effects that I can put in myself in the editing part of it. I don't necessarily need it where I can play it on air or play it while the record is happening for everybody to hear. I'm more of a go in after the words and find where spots are that I can tick that in or squeeze that in. So every once in a while I have something planned, so I'm going to allow a pause, or I'm going to kind of throw to something that I know I'm going to do ahead of time. But I at the beginning, I thought it would be really cool to have the mixing board and the sound effect board and all that type of different stuff. But the more I did it, I was like, I don't think that's necessary. And it's, for me, as someone that's a complete novice, it just complicates the record, and I'd rather complicate the editing than the record. Even if I'm editing, like I'd rather have to deal with it on my end than bog down the flow of the natural record.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough probably to do it on the fly either.
And I remember the days when we would use Pamela Call Recorder, and they had a sound effect board, and they had a sound effect board where you could actually add in, because I remember using Daffy's line from the 51st, and you smug son of a... You smug son of a... I remember using that all the time, but like it's much easier, and it's much like you find a place like you said with the stopping, like if somebody stops, and then like if you insult me or I insult you, and then there's a small pause. Well, in the editing, like you just said, we can just take the pause out, put the clip in, and move on and be done with it. And it still sounds like it was actually done. Ha! Right.
Pause.
Right. Exactly. As a producer, how much time do you put in the editing of the show? So whatever podcast it is, maybe back in the telecast days when you were editing stuff, or whatever, Cinema Geeks, all that stuff. Like if you record a 30 or 40 or 50-minute show or an hour and a half show, how much time
it really depends. It's a case-by-case basis for me. When I was doing just a general Cinema Geeks episode, it didn't take that long. I could probably edit that in half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. Just depends on how many clips I want to throw in and stuff like that. When I was doing something like a year end or a top list or something that was a little bit more of a monumental episode, or just especially with the top 10 movies, because I could throw in clips of various movies into it. So there was a little bit more of that. So that made it take a little bit longer. Obviously, it can take as long as you want. If it was something I was really passionate about and wanted it to be like the best episode I could put out, then it's probably going to take an hour and a half, 2 hours, something of that nature. If I'm doing my stuff on my own, where it's just me, it ends up taking a little bit longer than like a general episode of something, just because there's a lot. When it's just me, I try to add a lot more other stuff in there to try to keep the energy and keep the flow going. And so it's not just someone listening to me straight for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it might be. So I found when I'm doing my solo stuff, it takes a little bit longer. And when I'm doing my video stuff, it takes exponentially longer.
Yeah, video is a whole other...
And I'm still learning that, so I'm sure if I was better at it, it wouldn't take as long, but it just takes a while to do that. And I have to do all that on my phone at the moment, so that's just, it's a smaller surface to work, and sometimes my fingers are fat.
Yeah, exactly. That's why if I ever do, because I've done YouTube videos for years now, but I don't do them very, very often, and I do them on my phone as well, but I try to make sure I don't need to edit anything. Like I'll sit here, I did this, I think, before we clicked record on this half of the episode, but basically I have, like something like this. I'm not gonna, like if I do a video on that, or if I do a video on this, then I'm going to make sure I have it set up in a way where I know exactly what I'm saying. I know what I'm doing. I use a Pocket Tripod Pro for the Google Pixel 6 Pro. That's a lot of pros in those name, folks. Boy, naming of phones, don't get me started. But it's one of those things where video is a whole other... I would much rather deal with audio.
It's easier.
Anything. it's so much easier. Yeah, and I mean, I take the approach of I'm going to put, like, I have nothing but time on my hands because technically this is my job, kind of thing, where it's like I can put X number of hours into something, or I took a screenshot the other day, I think, and I'm only saying this because it was him who did it, but I think Steve sniffled in the middle of a recording on his track, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll edit that out. I'll obviously cut that out, and I took a screen cap of the waveform because I was going to send it to a friend of mine. I'm like, see, this is how I do it, because he asked me about a tool, this guy that actually, it's the next episode of this podcast. Next week, I'm going to have Ellis Roven on doing his podcast approach, and he's an audio guy like I am, kind of thing. And he asked me about some audio tool, like whatever, like not a mouse, not like a standard computer mouse. And I'm like, well, explain to me. Oh, that's what, essentially one of those bells and whistles, one of those other audio. Like, I can't do that. I just, if I need to see inside the waveform, I'll just zoom in. So, as a producer, do you prefer in-person recordings or over-the-internet recordings?
By in-person recordings, you mean?
Someone is sitting right next to you, either using the same microphone or sitting across from you using a laptop with a separate microphone in the same room.
Oh, I guess the only time I've ever done that would be when Amanda and I were both on Cinema Geeks because we shared a microphone and all that type of stuff. And it's fine. It's a little bit trickier just because you have to manage the physical aspect of it.
Yep.
But from a other standpoint, though, you can read each other's body language and you can give each other signals and things of that nature. So that, I think, added to our ability to make it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. As both a listener and a producer, do you prefer one feed have everything, or should each type of show have its own feed? So by this, basically, Tooncast is all cartoons, but what if we had one show that has episodes of He-Man, Transformers, like if we took all the review shows and put them all on one feed?
I like them better separate myself. Like, I like all of the Transformers stuff together, all the He-Man stuff separately.
Yep.
Anything that's kind of just one-offs, we're touching base on this, that, and the other, like we did in the early days of Tooncast. Obviously makes sense to be together. But if it's something where we're going episodic reviews or something like that, where there's a series, most of the time I'm going to prefer that to be separate, with the exception of, let's say, back when we were doing Cinema Geeks, if we had like a retrospective on a director or something like that, I think that was fine to be within the main feed.
Yeah, it's in the scope of what you're doing with the podcast. I mean, it's all movies all the time kind of thing. So all aspects of film, whether it's directors, actors, whatever.
Right.
And yes, something like Tooncast, where we're talking about the overall, like, we're not talking in depth. We're not going episode by episode or season by season kind of thing. It's much easier. But yeah, it always bugs me when if you have a show that is supposed to be if it's a general geek show, fine. But if it's supposed to be a specific thing and then you throw in like 17 other things, like, don't do that. That have nothing to do with the thing that I came there for.
Right.
How do you use social media to promote your podcast?
Probably not very well. I mean, I'm pretty lazy when it comes to social media just because I don't spend a whole lot of time on it. So I'll post a link and maybe a message on the various platforms, and very rarely will I post again after the initial posting. I mean, every once in a while I'll remember to do like a boost post or something of that nature, but I'm really bad at social media, so I don't do a swell job on that. I'd leave that to you.
Yeah, that's my job. So,
I mean, the people that are on social media, like, I don't understand, like, I get, like, for your situation, that's different. And some other people have similar situations or different things like that. But for the average person, like, I don't understand how they find the time. I guess it's office jobs maybe, and they're like half paying attention to their job and half on their phone or on their computer maybe. But like, it's literally impossible. Like 50 some hours a week, there would be no way for me to post or check or do anything with social media. So the people that are posting memes or retweets like every hour, every day, like I don't understand that.
So I know you're not that big into the superhero thing. You're more into the robots and the sci-fi and everything else. But there is an account on Twitter called Hourly Clint. Hourly Clint is all about Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye.
Mm-hmm.
And that account posts exactly what you're saying. Like, and there are jobs now.
Even people on Facebook, though, that post like a meme every 30 seconds for like the whole day. And I'm just like, if you're trying to scroll through to find something that you like, you scroll for like 10 minutes and you're 3 hours into the past.
Yep.
And I'm just like, I don't get that. Like, that's not how I use social media.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
especially
crazy.
on Facebook. I only use Facebook for connections to people I know that I don't live near, like family and friends, old classmates, things of that nature. So like to use Facebook as a meme posting engine is just something that my mind doesn't compute. Like I get that on like maybe like an Instagram or even maybe to a point Twitter, but like I don't use Facebook like that. So maybe that's just a different philosophy.
Yeah. They're all tools to me. Whatever I need to use them for, I'll use them for. Yes, we know. One feed. What is your favorite topic to discuss on a podcast?
I mean, would anybody like to guess? Cartoons.
Yeah.
And then the close second would be movies and wrestling and toys and anything 80s.
There you go. Now, obviously, to my knowledge, and I've known you a long time, but I don't think you've ever been in radio. But versus like,
only Amanda.
Oh, Amanda has? Okay, well that's good. I remember she had. Anyway, what do you see as the differences between podcasting versus being on the radio?
Radio's just from what she said and what I learned about her when she was doing her Saturday night show, it's just a lot more timing on the radio. Like you have to do a read and you have 7 seconds or you have 14 seconds or you have whatever, and you have to get this much information in that time, and it's on the fly, it's live. It's not something that you're able to go back and fix. So it's like a lot more about exact timing and trying to say something without fumbling over, because if you fumble over, you're going to miss the mark, and then the music's going to start playing and you're still talking and stuff like that. So there was definitely a piece of that. They were also typically, I think most radio stations and most things like that are required to do some social media posting and things of that nature, which seemed like I just have to post because it's requirement for me to post 3 things every hour to get people's attention. And that wouldn't work for me, but
yeah, I don't mind doing the whole social media thing, and I don't, that's fine. I can do that. That's easy. That's great. It's just keeping up with, oh, did I post that or not? Like that for me is my biggest issue, is either remembering to post something or whatever. That's why I'm like, certain people are like, if you want me to post this about your show, you have to send me a message at least the day of or whatever, or whenever it's ready, so I can know when to do it. So, because I'll forget. Like,
yeah,
I just will. Half the time.
But radio, there's just no editing there. I mean,
oh no, yeah, not at all. It's all
take backs.
Yeah, nope. And that's the funny thing is, because I don't know, and you can tell me what your story is, and everyone probably has heard me say this before, but when we were kids, we were listening to the radio all the time. We were radio listeners most of the time, and we would and we would interact. Maybe we would get a chance to call in or whatever else, even as young adults, kind of thing. But man, no, I could not keep up with the pace that radio.
Because I've been there when she was on her show. At times, we brought her food or something like that, and it's like,
right.
It is small time crunches, and then every once in a while you'll have a little bit of a longer break where you can try to get something to drink or something like that. But it's like you got to be ready to go, and sometimes it's a lot of words that you have to try to say in between your little pauses in between songs or intro coming back from a commercial break or whatever it is, and it's like boom.
Yeah, the only way you're getting long breaks on the radio is if you have nothing but a Tool radio station, and all the Tool songs are like 11 minutes long.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while it depends on how many songs you're playing in a row without a thing, but yeah, it depends.
Yeah. This one's going to be interesting because I know you have, because I've done them with you, but if you've done any interviews with famous people, which was your favorite?
Interesting. let's see, we've done Larry Kenney, we've done Rob Paulson, we've done Maurice LaMarche, we've done... Did we do Neil Ross together?
I think so. That might have been me and I don't remember, but yeah.
I think they've all been fun to a certain extent because you're talking to somebody that, is a celebrity, is a person that you listen to or looked up to or, know from a distance. So when that wall gets kind of broken down and you're discussing stuff with them, I think that makes it fun. I think Maurice LaMarche was a lot of fun. It might not have been like I was probably looking forward to the Rob Paulson and the Larry Kenney one more at that exact time and juncture in my life, but Maurice was just really laid back and humorous and fun to talk to. I think the one time we talked to, it might have been Rob. He was in a car on the highway or something, pulled off along the side of the road, so that made it a little more awkward.
I know that happened in one of the Stan Bush interviews I did, but
I think it happened with one of the voice actors too that I was on with you. But not that took that much away from it. It was just a little bit of an awkward thing. But I think Maurice LaMarche was a lot of fun. But they're all fun no matter what. John Delancey, I think we did together. That was fun.
Yep.
So they're all a different experience. They're all unique because of whatever the person's mood is at that time or whatever their personality is or whatever, their reactions to the questions. I'm sure a lot of times they do interviews and they're just bored out of their mind because it's the same old questions. So it's a mixed bag what you're going to get, but if you can pull it off right, it's a very fun experience.
Yeah. And in, my 14 years of doing this, because Steve started a couple of years, but I always say Steve is at 16 years at this point and I'm at 14 years because I just celebrated my 14th anniversary back in December of 2022. But the thing is we set out, like we knew in the beginning when you and I were setting up interview questions for Tooncast or for whatever it is for the specific voice actor interviews, let's say, we knew, okay, yes, we are going to have to take them through some of their beginnings, but let's do something like, and this is all your fault because you threw this in there, what's your favorite type of voice acting? And then, the next thing we know, for about 15 minutes, we're either in trouble with Maurice LaMarche or we're made famous by IGN. Because that interview, what type of voice acting do you prefer, blah, 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 blah. Video games, animation, narration, blah, blah. He said, the funny thing about video games is it's just you in a room. And I just got out of I still remember that, what felt like a 30-minute pause. It was like 20 seconds. But he said, I just got out of voicing Mr. Freeze in Batman Arkham City. My jaw dropped to the floor. I've said this story so many times recently. I edited that interview so fast, got it online, didn't ask him if he wasn't supposed,
Usually they're pretty careful about that. So it's
usually they are.
It was not, he didn't mess. I mean, he's
no. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, most voice actors are pretty careful about it, and they know all of their NDAs and their contracts and stuff like that. So even if you come close to it, they're like, well, I can't talk about that. So there was no reason. If a voice actor's sharing something, there's no reason for us to think, well, that's privileged information or something.
Well, because I remember, like I said, I literally, even though it was 11 years ago, I remember it like it was freaking yesterday because he said that after you asked him the question and my stunned silence, jaw dropping the floor. My next question was, can you give us a sample? And he goes, no, I can't. Okay. And then we moved on and we went on with the interview. But that question, what type of voice acting do you prefer? You don't know what's going to happen with that one because...
That was interesting, too, because I don't know anything about comics, so I had no idea what he was talking about. I mean, I know who Mr. Freeze is and this, that, and the other, but I had no idea if it was a game or a game that wasn't out or this, that, and the other. But I do remember calling you or texting you or something and being like, dude, something's happening. We could get in a lot of buzz right now.
Well, Steve blew me up. Steve was like, what the fuck did you do? And Steve doesn't usually curse most of the time, but what did you do? I'm like, I don't know because I went out and went grocery shopping with my mom at the time.
Right.
I don't know. I edited a podcast. I put it online. That's didn't do anything wrong, I don't think, obviously, but right. at the time, I and obviously I contacted his management. I contacted him, and by the time he replied to me, he's like, "It's out there. There's nothing we can do about it now." So,
yeah.
Was there ever a moment when you were done with podcasting altogether?
No, there's been moments that my life has made it very hard to do podcasts, but I don't think there's ever been a time where I've been like, screw this, I'm done forever type thing. There's been a few times where I've been like, screw you, I'm done with you forever. But outside of that, or different people along the way that have rubbed me the wrong way that I'm like, well, I'm not recording with that person again, or I don't really want to be associated with that person again, or that just didn't work from a chemistry standpoint or things of that nature. But I don't think there's ever been a time where I've just been like, blah. I mean, there's been times where it's been more or less of a priority. And there's been times where my life has allowed it to be more or less of an active, hobby that I'm participating in, but that's about it.
Yeah. What advice do you have for new and veteran podcasters in the art of podcasting?
I don't know if there's much of advice for a veteran podcaster. They're probably pretty set in their ways, but I think there's a lot of people that it seems like every day there's 1,000 new podcasts hitting the airwaves and whatnot. So I think it comes down to, if you're going to record something, make sure that it is something you're passionate about and something you can bring energy to. So if you can do those two things, the rest you can probably figure out. But if you're just monotonous or droning or reading something, or there's just awkward pauses and things of that nature, then maybe this isn't the best thing for you. Not everybody's trying to make money off of this, but if you are doing it, it should be something that's at least pleasant to the ear.
Absolutely. Yeah, there have been podcasts that I've found in the last 2 years that I didn't even know existed. Like some that it started in like 2017 or 2018. I'm like, where in the hell was I in those years? Like, I don't remember any of the... And obviously, with the pandemic and everything else and all that, everybody was like, "Oh, we're all at home. We all need to let's start a podcast." And you had all these,
Yeah, it definitely did blow up, and as more and more have been popular, like we were in on podcasts like way early on. Like, I'm not saying like we were the first or anything like that, but
no.
We were in it when still the masses weren't listening to podcasts. It was more of a niche thing, and now it seems like it's just more and more invading everyday activity of a lot more people. It's become way more mainstream, and for some people it's obviously become way more of a moneymaker. So then just like YouTube or social media things or whatever, it becomes somebody that is trying to make a buck off of it as well, or make a career out of it. So then it becomes a whole different thing. I think the other piece of advice, which is harder, it's easier said than done for sure, but if you want to have a successful podcast that actually gains traction and builds listeners, followers, subscribers, etc., I haven't been very good at this, but you have to have consistent releases. Like, you have to be able to, like, it is a grind sometimes. And that's where the balance comes in, because you don't want it to be a grind where people can tell it's a grind. But when I say it's a grind, there is no break. Like, you have to have a release every week, let's say, just as one example, depending on the frequency of your podcast. Like, and you have to continue that. There's very few forgiving aspects as far as taking weeks, months, off. You have to have something that hits that airwaves. Now, granted, some people cheat and they do a best of, or they do a clip show, or they do a repeat thing or whatever, just like cartoons did back in the day, where they had to run a rerun or a best of, or, whatever the case may be. But you have to have that consistent. And if you're not willing to dedicate and to understand what kind of dedication that is when you have your real life going on, to produce something every single week, it might not be for you, or you should just be honest with yourself off the bat and just do a slower release schedule every other week, once a month, type thing. But that's not going to build much of a following.
Yeah. Nobody's as crazy as I am, folks. Like 20 or 30 different shows all at once, and most of them are either on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis.
But that's what I've seen. Like when we were big time into our movie podcasting, and I had a pretty good circle of other movie podcast friends and colleagues and, acquaintances and things of that nature. And let's say there was, 8 shows or something like that I was actively listening to or had connections to, the hosts or the whatever. Basically, you could tell which one, like all of them were building audiences as long as they were consistent.
Right.
Were they successful? They were successful to different levels, and maybe the audience size might vary, but they were all building in those years where it was all of us releasing episodes every single week. We were all building those connections. We were all building our audience. We were all building comments and views and likes and subscriptions and whatever metric you're looking at. But you could tell as soon as one, then this one would start being a little bit more infrequent releases, and then this one would start dropping off. And, the ones that are still going have very big audiences and have been fairly successful just because they've been able to produce that content week after week after week. Whereas most of the other ones over the last 10 years have stopped producing altogether or do it very rarely or, once every couple months.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the last couple of months or last year at this point, because like I said, this is 2023 at this point, beginning of 2023, I was trying to catalog all the guest appearances I've done, like not on our stuff. Like when if I called into Simplistic because they had a call-in line, or if I was on any other show that wasn't stuff we were doing, I was trying to compile all of these, and I remember being on a show and talking about Batman Beyond, and I went to look for it. I found the episode, but the file isn't there anymore. But the fact that, website archives, whatever, but the fact that the post is there, and the fact that I was on the show, it was called Masters of the Tooniverse. And yeah, it was with some guy named Brian. I think he goes by Cartoon Overlord. And I've been trying to reach out to him on Instagram, but he's never responded, whether he's seen the messages or not, just to see if I can get that, that audio file back, not back so I can, but like, you know what I mean? Like, so I can listen back to what that was in 2014. Because I remember being on the show. I remember talking about the cartoon. I just haven't heard it in a long ass time. And that podcast is now apparently gone. Like there's no nothing left of it. And yeah, just sucks. So speaking of no nothing left of it, hopefully there isn't no nothing left of it. But when are we getting the return of the Cinema Geeks or Telecast?
Dan and I really were trying to record an episode all of last year because we were doing our best of the decade for 2010 to 2019, and then we had released a number of things over the course of whatever 2019, 2020, somewhere in there, and we had never got to our actual best films of that decade, which we both have our list done. We both have everything prepped, just between the two of us and babies and kids and things of that nature. It hasn't lined up yet, but we're hoping to release that. I'm hoping to do that early in 2023. Telecast, I don't know. I have no plans with it as of this moment, just because I am all in on 3 other projects that we're doing, and then a 4th one that I'm hoping to do. So it's on the back burner at the moment, but don't say never. But yeah, the theme song podcast that I've been working on behind the scenes, and then my I don't know how you want to call this, but the episode by episode watch through of every cartoon series that aired in the 80s. It had to take a little break when we moved, but I want to get back into that. I think I'm on chapter like 6 or 7 or something like that out of those.
Yeah.
And then of course Geek Showcase is taking a lot of my time at the moment.
Yeah. Geek Showcase is your new YouTube channel, and you want to talk about that?
Well, it's just a geek showcase, so it's a showcase of anything geeky. So I'm going to try to. Now, it's a little misleading if you look at the channel now, because there's a whole lot of like sports cards breaking and ripping and opening and things like that. Yeah, that was just because that was what I could record the quickest, knowing that I had a move coming up and I could bank a bunch of episodes so that I could then sort of try to keep the releases on a schedule of sorts, not a strict schedule, but just, so there was releases happening. So there's a way more of those than I would have planned on it, but there's going to be toy reviews. There's going to be book reviews as far as like geeky books and things of that nature. There's going to be top lists. There's going to be just anything geeky that I can think of. The kind of the banner graphic shows everything: wrestling, sci-fi, Star Trek, Star Wars, cartoons, toys, anything like that is going to be featured. And we're just going to see where it goes. Right now I'm working my way through the ultimate Saturday morning cartoon lineup.
Very cool. Very cool. Where can the people find your shows besides Geek Showcase?
Geek Showcase on all things social media. It's on Instagram, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook and Twitter. My stuff is OptimusSolo, and otherwise just search Geekcast Radio, and you can find most other things that I may or may not be involved with. But it's worth a listen.
Yep, absolutely. All right, folks, we're going to go to one final ad break, come back to close the show after this.
Hey, it's Wes from Poppin' Off Toys. Wanted to let you know about PoppinOffToys.com. We can be your number one source for Funko collectible figures to add to your ever-growing collection. If you're in Nashville, Tennessee, we actually have a retail store that you can come by, 5916 Charlotte Pike. And for the rest of us, PoppinOffToys.com is always open, and you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And the name is just simply Poppin' Off Toys. Thank you so much, and always keep it poppin'.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk.
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing. Car.
Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
We are back here inside Studio 2009 on Optimus Solo's podcast approach, and sadly there's been no mac and cheese tonight. Anyway. Dun, dun, dun. And yeah, so any other final thoughts before I run through the outro, sir?
No, just looking forward to producing more content and getting more interactions with everybody and seeing where everything goes.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier in the episode, folks, coming up next, we've got another podcast approach. And then after that, Steve Megatron and I and a few other people probably are going to get to do some movies. We are going to be doing a bunch of TV stuff this year. I did want, because the whole point here inside Studio 2009 is Steve and I wanted a show, and I've said this before, we wanted a show that we didn't have to worry about it just being a movie show. It could be anything. And when I say anything, I specifically mean anything in the audio or visual realm. So if you can hear it or you can see it or see and hear it, we will cover it. So we've been doing a lot of movie reviews and things like that. And in 2023, I have a goal where we can, kind of talk about some TV stuff, whether it's new shows, old shows, whatever. There is no real plan there yet, but there will be at some point. But yeah,
and keep your ears peeled and eyes peeled for some top 100 content coming in 2023.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Get those toys ready, folks. Thank you for joining us here inside Studio 2009. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can listen to and comment on all of our content. Send us email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. You can check us out on any podcatching client you choose to use, stuff like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that other good stuff.
Podcast Addict.
Yeah, Spotify has the best UI for me.
Podcast Addict.
Yeah, I tried it once on your recommendation. I didn't like the user interface, so sorry, not going to work.
It's great.
Nope. Follow us on Twitter at Geekcast Radio for the network, at ITS Studio 2009, all one word for the show. I am at TFG1Mike. He is at OptimusSolo, and you can also follow at Geek Showcase everywhere. Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Geekcast Radio Network. You can also check out Studio 2009 podcast over there as well. Coming up next is one more podcast approach before we get back to some movies and TV reviewing, and we're probably going to throw in some video games in there as well. So we've got that coming up with Mr. Ellis Rovin. At one point, he was a professor of audio. He was a teacher, and he was doing not necessarily a music class, but it was an electronic, audio production thing at some university he was doing. So that was a very fun conversation. So that's coming up next, folks. For now, I am TFG and Mike with
the one that's usually right, Optimus Solo.
Wrong. You'll hear us back in the studio soon.